Nothing changes instantaneously. In a gradually heating bathtub, you'd be boiled to death before you knew it. Our Father, who art in heaven. Seriously? What the actual fuck?
Gilead doesn't care about children. Gilead cares about power.
Why does healing have to be the only goal? Why can't we be as furious as we feel?
For whatever man sows, so shall he reap.
Welcome to Above the Garage. Hi, friends. Welcome to our discussion of Season 6, Episode 7. Let's do our round of introductions and dive in.
Hi, I'm Aubrey.
Hi, I'm Marigold.
Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I am Kate. All right, my friends, let's get this one over with, shall we? I have been dreading this discussion. I imagine we all have since I saw the episode. It is always our preference to love the episode we're talking about. It's a lot easier and a lot more fun that way, but sometimes we're not so lucky. And we know we've carved out an awesome little niche in the Handmaid's Tale world. And we also know that we owe it to our listeners who will be reeling right now to be honest about our thoughts and feelings here, as there's been a major change and a major character arc in this episode. The intended, which was Nick's, of course, but even more so for us, June's. Usually when we are disappointed with the direction the show has taken, we can also try to balance it a bit by focusing positively on the other storylines we have enjoyed in the episode. However, the majority of this episode is devoted to characters piling on Nick, so as a result, the brunt of our discussion will of course also be about that. So what I'm saying is, if you're not a Nick or a Nick and June fan, you probably would not enjoy this discussion, so come back next week, if you want. We know this episode of Handmaids will leave most of our longtime listeners with strong feelings. Sad, anger, whatever it is, we get it. And if you love this episode, good for you. But for the rest of you that didn't, we understand. Having heard countless times how this final season was a love letter for the fans, we know how it feels to suddenly realize they meant for all of the fans except for those of Nick and June. It has helped us immensely after watching this episode to have each other to talk through it with, and I hope we can provide that for those of you that maybe need to hear that you're not crazy. Because I promise you, you are not crazy. And while there will be plenty of genuine emotion from us slipping out during this discussion, that's unavoidable, it's important to us to also present facts to back up why you're not crazy if you're feeling like you're being gaslit by this episode. In 2025 America, we get enough gaslighting from our president to recognize it with ease, and we're apparently not numb to it yet. But before getting down to details, we do have some thoughts on why the show might suddenly be doing this. We don't know anything for sure. But it's long been a fear of some of our group. A few others have stayed incredibly optimistic throughout. But some of our group has wondered if the show has, for some reason, been angered by the attention that Nick and June has drawn and blamed it primarily on Nick. If this is true, that would explain why they've dragged on the very uneven love triangle for 6 whole seasons, tried several different personalities on Luke season after season in the hopes people might, quote-unquote, switch teams, and why they've piled awful situation after awful situation on Nick in an effort to douse Nick and June's fire and turn this particular fandom off. It even seemed like maybe they were purposefully taking the things we've loved about Nick and June, Hawaii, for example, or wished for Nick and June, Rebel Nick and June, for example, and given it to Luke, either simply to hurt that part of the fandom, or to try to get us to switch teams, or maybe both. Instead of making Nick and Maid a rebel and staying true to Margaret Atwood's brilliant original book, they decided to torture him instead. I can't imagine how depressing it must have been for Max to read his script season after season. One might think with all the fans he brought in, he might be given more screen time or a better storyline eventually, and we held out hope that season 6 would be that season for him. But instead, each season just got worse and worse as it seems they tried to make the fans turn on Nick. For financial reasons alone, this baffles me. Look at any show Instagram post and you'll see that the majority of fans, by far, are drawn in by the Nick and June storyline. And we're talking numbers like 80 to 90%, not a slight majority by any means. In all honesty, I don't think any of us in this group would have stuck around without that storyline, purely because it's such a dark and depressing show that without that light to overcome the darkness from time to time, it would just be too painful to watch, especially while the real world around us became bleaker and bleaker. But for our group, all this episode is doing is assassinating June's character. Audiences have long grown tired of June's selfishness and savior complex. We've tried so hard to give June the benefit of the doubt as much as possible every season, but especially this season, even as she tells the Mayday leader, Moira can't do this, or tells Luke he can't do that, we've tried to hang on to the feelings she inspired in us the first 2 seasons. But if she won't give Nick, the man who saved her life countless times, and now her husband's and her best friend's only days ago, if she can't give him an ounce of the grace she gives actual Gilead founders Serena and Lawrence even, then that's the last straw. For us. Loyalty in a person or character is important to us, and I find the fact that June hasn't been romantically loyal to either Luke or Nick fairly gross at this point. Certainly very disappointing, but I had stupidly assumed that no matter what, the overarching loyalty to both of our baby's fathers and their safety was something that would be guaranteed forever. And I was apparently mistaken in that hope. Clearly, it's only Luke and Serena she cares about or feels any loyalty towards, which I find absolutely insane at this point. After 6 years of Nick devoting his whole life to her and risking his time and again to save hers, this is how she repays him? Never mind, he didn't even betray her. He could have, and he didn't. When Wharton cornered Nick in the last episode, he had to give up something that would explain not only his Jezebel's visit, but also that he's clearly responsible for killing the two guardians from the water park. And a guardian was killed at Jezebel's this night, too. So Nick did have a huge blinking betray June option in front of him. Tell Wharton that June Osborne is outside right now and the reason for every one of those killings. He chose not to smash that betray June button and went with the plan that was a week away instead, a textbook page out of Double Agency 101. You have to play both sides and occasionally give the bad guys something real to keep them trusting you. And Wharton's trust was about at a half a ply of thinness, as we saw, but this worked and renewed it. And as Nick said, he had no idea what Wharton would do. And what Wharton did is on Wharton's head. The show showed us the brutal scene, again in the efforts of making us hate Nick. But in reality, as we'll discuss later, June's done similar things. We just haven't been forced to look at the carnage. And it's awful what happened, and you can see that Nick is absolutely hating himself and blaming himself for it. Anyway, on to this episode. I've read many times that one of the cardinal rules of television writing is show, don't tell. To have nearly an entire episode of television this late in the game devoted to all these side characters telling us how we're supposed to feel about Nick doesn't feel like what they meant by that. 4 characters are telling us we're supposed to now think Nick is a big bad Gilead commander and has always been untrustworthy? Because what we've seen on screen is quite literally the opposite. As Kira Snyder, the writer of Nick's flashback episode, replied to Marigold in a tweet about our analysis of that episode, all us writers were really interested in exploring how everyday people get pulled into movements like this, especially someone with a good heart. A man, that was in all caps by the way, with a good heart. Because from the get-go, Nick has had a good heart. He was trying to take care of his unemployed father and alcoholic brother when he got a job driving Sons of Jacob people around. Because Price promised him they would be flexible with his hours. All Nick has wanted his entire life is to take care of the people he loves. And now we learn that not a single person loves him back. He was not one of the Commander Lawrence or Serena Waterford types pre-Gilead who had grand plans for a better world without women at the helm, and designed the attack on America to get that done. No, Nick was a driver. Serena and Fred designed the attack on America. Sure, at some point, he likely overheard some shit that would have made him realize he should get the fuck out of there, but often by the time that happens, they won't let you leave, so he kept his head down and survived. We're not saying he never made bad choices. So anyway, he was a driver before the Gilead takeover, and then when June meets him, years later, this is how she describes him to us. He's the commander's driver, lives over the garage, low status, hasn't even been issued a woman. Wow, so he's still just a driver years later. I won't detail everything he's done since then, though I'm sure plenty of it will come out in this episode, but none of it is the untrustworthy Gilead commander bullshit that they're trying to feed us. He got 3 promotions that I'm aware of since he's been in Gilead, only one that he actually sought for himself. That one was when he asked to become an eye after he saw the Waterford's first handmaid hang herself from her chandelier, because he wanted to report on commanders, not handmaids. He wanted to report on commanders, and he started by taking down Commander Guthrie's, the commander who dreamt up the handmaid system. Nick did that directly in retribution for the first Waterford handmaid, who Fred and Serena had driven to suicide. It was too late to save her, but he could punish one of the men that drove her to it, and continue spying on Fred Waterford, one of the other commanders that were responsible for her death. So there's a very good deed Nick did long before June, for the record. The second of the 3 quote-unquote promotions, they called giving him a wife, Eden, a promotion. But in actuality, it was a uniquely cruel punishment dreamt up by Serena when Nick asked her to please take June to a mental health doctor after she had seen Omar on the wall and disappeared into herself. Nick was so concerned about June that he asked Serena for a fucking therapist, knowing what a dangerous thing he was doing, but loving June more than he cared for his own consequences. And you all probably remember Serena was quite mean to June for most of the show, but I bet many of you forgot the depths of her evil. She married Nick to a child in punishment for his concern for June, and just to further hurt her very sick pregnant handmaid. It's not hard to imagine why the last one killed herself, but it still managed to shock me that Serena was willing to risk the baby she wanted so badly, just because she hated that Nick cared about June that much. And lastly, the third of 3 promotions Nick has received in his years in Gilead. He was promoted to commander after he held Fred at gunpoint all night during June and Holly's escape. He held him at gunpoint in June's room, knowing that this was his one chance to use his life to free theirs. He knew he would end up on the wall afterwards. He didn't even try to escape. And instead, Fred punished him by making him a commander, knowing Nick would hate that and it would remove him from the picture, without Fred having to admit to anyone what had actually happened, that his driver had gotten the better of him and his handmaid had tried to escape. And his whole household had helped June. So there are the three big bad rungs of the ladder Nick has climbed in Gilead. Lawrence, on the other hand, has just become a high commander now. Anyway, we'll talk more about Lawrence and, of course, Nick throughout the episode, but I just wanted to touch a few key points of Nick's history first, in case anyone forgot his backstory. Lastly, and I am very sorry for how long this soliloquy is going on, and we're going to get into the details of the episode, but lastly, I want to say one more thing. To our listeners who care for Nick and June, I know people have been and are going to continue to come out and say Nick fans don't get the point of the show. It's not a love story, and we're just a bunch of silly, naive fangirls. It seemed like some of the seeds of that were being planted in this episode, with multiple references to how hot Nick is. So let me explain something we've spent years repeating, that Nick's physical attractiveness has nothing to do with the reason we love his character. Women are not as simple and shallow as you're making them out to be. This group, for instance, is not a bunch of teenage fangirls. We are women in our 30s and 40s, many of us moms, with careers like doctors, wealth managers, professors, and more in industries that are as varied as the locations from which we come from all around the world. Same as our listeners. And to our listeners, please take this next part to heart. No matter how someone may try to shame you, it is not anti-feminist to believe in and care about romantic love. Our protagonist herself has said many times it is for love that she lives. Love is empowering, and we thought that was a message that the show understood. The show writers could have written Nick as a rebel, like Margaret Atwood did in the source material. Max would have been amazing in that role, and it would have gone to show that we need male allies in feminism. He is, after all, the male character who has supported and facilitated our female protagonist's agency more than anyone else in the show. No matter how idiotic what she wanted to do was, he was there to help her reach her goals, killing Fred, for instance, and try to keep her alive. Handmaids also could have simply leaned into the incredible chemistry, love, and the following that Nick and June have, and gone down in television history forever for having landed the best romance in television, in addition to capturing these wonderful relationships between all the women on the show. Because much like in life, it's not mutually exclusive. You can and should cultivate a life with wonderful friends like Janine and Moira, and also someone you love romantically who loves you back, if you're so lucky. It's not an either or. And again, I cannot say this enough, it is not a weakness or a character flaw in the viewers for appreciating it. People will feed you this line and try to belittle you, but do not let the bastards grind you down. I'd rather be a person who appreciates the beauty in all of these different types of relationships than someone who treats romantic love as naive and silly. You know who else thought romantic love was naive and silly? Our old friend Fred Waterford, may he rest in peace. All right, again, I'm sorry for how long that was, but once I started writing, it just kept coming out. Are you guys okay with everything I said, or do you have anything to add or edit to the more general discussion before we dive into the details of the episode?
Great speech, Kate. I have nothing to add, and I agree with everything.
I agree.
Yeah, that was great. I think it's weird to me because I felt like we could have Nick and Luke as characters and as characters in June's life even without it being a love triangle. And when you start calling it a love triangle and making it about that, it makes it seem like we're watching like a teen drama instead of the complexity of a very real adult situation that everybody is in.
Right.
And yeah. I would have much rather seen how they handled the complexity of that.
And for me, the love between Luke and June never bothered me.
Yeah, not at all.
I believe that there's love, but because they have that history, June deeply cares about him, they share a child together, that's never bothered me, and that's never actually taken away from June and Nick's relationship. So I feel like saying it's a love triangle is just
reductive.
Yeah, it's reductive. It's a complex situation. She loves both, but she loves both in different ways. So
yeah, and I hate that we even have to spend so much time talking about this, to be honest, because it shouldn't be this big of a part of the show.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so distracting to if that is what they didn't like, they didn't like the Nick and June tension. What they've done by dragging it out and constantly marketing Love Triangle, I mean, it's just distracted so much further from the rest of the story, which I would like to enjoy, but this episode in particular made it. I mean, I don't know what will happen in the future episodes and if it will be less distracting by causing this last second absurd June turns on Nick for something he actually was cornered and had to do, and it doesn't make any sense, so it's very distracting to me from the rest of the story, and I imagine it would be hard to focus in the future episodes if it's not resolved in some logical fashion,
Yeah.
It feels so manufactured and it's so late in the game, and it just really disappoints me story-wise that they're doing this at this point in the game.
Exactly.
Yep.
And like, I'm a big fan of romance novels, and the conflict here is basically a good example of this third act conflict that would in general be resolved rather quickly,
Yeah, right.
right before the end, the inevitable happily ever after
Yeah.
for the main couple. But I don't know if that's where they're going with this, because I feel on a personal level that I was being gaslit
Yeah.
for the entire duration of this episode.
Right.
And when you consider the political climate right now, calling
Yeah.
Nick a Nazi, bringing the word into the show again
Yeah.
for the second time this season after episode 2, now being said by Luke, is just, I feel like it's irresponsible, and especially when the show has characters like Serena and Lawrence who are actually, they were in
They
charge
founded
of
it.
founding Gilead,
Right.
Yep.
but they're not called Nazis by anyone.
No,
It's
and
just Nick, who was a foot soldier. Like, why is this happening? Why does this make sense?
right. No, I don't, especially with the Serena storyline, it's just baffling to me that you think that the founder of Gilead, who held June down and raped her at 9 months pregnant, should be given a more redemptive and, I mean, she gets a pass, period, from everyone on the show and June. And I'm assuming a redemptive arc will be coming. I don't know, but I'm assuming that pretty strongly.
Feels like they're going that way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
June like has more sympathy for Serena and more grace about her,
And more concern.
more concern, and it's giving her more time to explain herself than she is with Nick.
Right. She's given Nick zero time to explain himself. She knows who he is and that he would never maliciously have had those women killed. He told her the only things he was able to get out before she left are that he didn't know that he never thought they would do that to the woman. He did not say that it was the woman.
Yeah.
And yet she refuses to give him the benefit of the doubt or even a moment's consideration, or thinks about, okay, yeah, it seems she would rather him be dead this morning than listen to the reasons that he was forced to tell Wharton something, you know? And she saw him up there and she knew the situation. And Nick said, go to Serena's for safety in case I'm in trouble here, you know? And yet she didn't worry about him. She never worries about him. And it's so out of character.
Yeah.
But that's how she's been, I think, since season 5, since they dragged on this love triangle. It's just so beyond out of character that it's a different show. But in this alternate universe show, I'm very annoyed also.
Kind of like what Sarah was saying. It's hard for fans not to feel like Serena's getting redemption just because she's a woman, and Nick is being portrayed as this bad person because he's a man. And I feel like that's extremely problematic.
Yeah.
That's not what feminism is. Like,
No.
this is supposed to be a feminist show, and I feel like they're getting it all wrong. And it's just, again, in this political climate, it's really disappointing that the show could have done such a good job of like showing what true feminism is, and to me it's not. Even the scenes with Moira and June later on, I don't know if we'll get into it, but I just feel like it's so disheartening to me.
Yeah. I found that particular conversation reductive is a word I use a lot in this episode. Offensive and reductive.
Yeah, I think that Moira and June scene is the worst in the episode for me, for reasons that I guess we can get into when we get there. But
yeah.
Well, and I just want to say, like, the only thing that I can think of that would make any sense out of this is I was realizing that this episode, I think, takes place in like a day, like this episode and the episode previous to it. So if we get June like coming to terms with this in the next episode, that'd be, I could sort of understand her being like emotionally over the top for like a moment. I mean, it's too much, and they're definitely like pushing it pretty far for what he did, but I can see her doing this and then coming back around, you know, right away in the next episode.
And that's a June thing.
It's a June thing.
But the reason that I fear that's not what's happening is because this whole episode seems to be intended to tell the audience how they're supposed to feel.
For sure.
To tell the audience that they've misunderstood all along and everything they've seen is not what they've seen. He's not a good guy. That's my fear, that it's not going to be different, because it was not just June lashing out, which I totally expected, and that would be very in character. They took every character to try and tell us how we should have realized that he is a terrible commander. How could you ever trust him?
Yeah.
Never mind why he became a commander or an eye, which I already touched upon before, but it bears repeating. He became an eye when he saw the first Waterford handmaid had killed herself because of her misery in that household. And so he sought out to do something about it, and he asked Price to be promoted to an I so that he could take down commanders. And the first one he took down was Commander Guthries, who created the Handmaid system, right?
Yep.
But they want us only to remember he's a commander in Gilead. They don't want us to remember any of the history behind why.
The reason why he's a commander is because he helped June and Holly escape, and Fred punished him for it.
But I don't think we're supposed to remember those things anymore.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to remember the first 2 seasons anymore.
Right.
And I question if the show even remembers those things anymore, to be honest, which is kind of upsetting.
Yeah. The writer and like the actors, like the executive producers, they forget a lot of these details. And it's like, it's unfair to fans, you know, who
pay attention.
Who pay attention. It feels like the show is being reduced down to the casual viewer. They'll be fine with this story, but the people who have watched the show and really enjoyed the earlier seasons, and they've given us like such good content in the earlier seasons. So I don't understand this like switch now.
Well, I think some of the writers that understood Nick better, that wrote his flashback episode, etc., like Dorothy Fortenberry. And
Yeah, Kira Snyder, she wrote his episode in 108, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Jezebel's one, yeah.
Right. These people have left the writing staff.
Yeah.
And they perhaps understood Nick better. All right, let's just dig into the details so that we can get through this episode. But again, none of us want to have this discussion because it's a lot more fun when we understand and get the story and it makes sense. So the episode opens where it left off, with Nick and June in the closet directly after June's overheard Wharton telling Serena about shutting down Jezebel's. But the other scene that is overlaid with her reaction is the scene of what actually went down at Jezebel's that night, and it's absolutely horrendous to watch. They shoved the women into showers and mowed them down with machine guns, only pulling Janine out at the last minute. It's a horrible scene of war that is specifically intended to make you think of the Holocaust, I imagine, as they spend a lot of screen time calling Nick a Nazi this season. June didn't actually see what we saw, though, so after Nick tells her that Janine is safe, she asks if they're dead, and he does his sad nod, and as he tells her repeatedly, he didn't tell Wharton that the women had done anything to do with it, and he never thought Wharton would do that. So just like us, when we left off the last episode, he thought he could give Wharton something to get him off his back immediately, but he had plenty of notice to warn Mayday to change their mission. He thought he was buying time to get June out of New Bethlehem, which was the immediate danger, and he had to tell Wharton something that very moment. And she's the one that wanted him to be a double agent. So this is what double agents have to do. They have to play both sides.
Yep. I mean, also, I wouldn't have thought Wharton would have done that either.
No.
Like, based on what we've seen of him. So, of course, Nick is not going to expect that.
Right.
Yeah, he said it was Mayday. It wasn't, I mean, unless they assumed the Jezebels were Mayday.
But which they weren't.
No.
Like, this is literally a Mayday plan that had nothing to do with the Jezebel's woman.
I felt that because of Wharton, he hated Jezebel so much that he just wanted an excuse to get rid of the women.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and after the fact, we can understand that.
He would have done it because of some reason anyway.
Yep, for
Right.
sure.
Yeah.
If not for this, he would have done it later for some other reason.
Right.
And the first line that Nick says to June was, "Your friend was taken." He always does that for June, like with Hannah, like
Right.
403, like
Her personal concern, he reassures her.
he knows what's important to her.
Yes.
And I think that the impact of this, like because they're cutting between these two scenes, the impact is much worse on the audience versus like, I mean, June has been responsible for Jezebel's killings twice before this. So
Right.
They just didn't show them to us.
yeah, they didn't show them to us. So Winslow's death, which of course I don't blame her for that. But then they cleaned house. And then the Jezebels in 402,
In the country club.
where she helped them poison commanders. Like, what was the point of that? It was just selfish.
Right.
She just wanted to hurt them.
Which I have a whole thing about that because June had an escape route the whole time. So she was she was protected. She had a guy
Yep.
out in the car that was going to take her back to the farm.
Yep.
She was going to be fine with no plan to help the women after she left. She just, it's like a burning building behind her. She's slowly walking away from it. She just doesn't think about or doesn't care about the consequences of that. And I think the only woman who actually knew what was going on was the one she talked to in that like greenhouse that was from Boston Jezebels.
Mhm.
So, right?
Yeah.
So everybody else, I mean, maybe they told everybody, but it's like she didn't make a plan to actually protect them then.
Right.
So why is she so self-righteous about it now?
Yeah. The hypocrisy is insane.
Yeah.
It's like if she can't live with what Nick did now, to me it means that she can't live with what she did herself back then.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Anyway, she demands he drives her back, so he does. And also, if you're wondering when all this is taking place, Nick's car tells us it's around lunchtime on Sunday, November 26, 2024. I don't know if that'll make it into the on-air version. And obviously, I digress. June asks to get out of the car, though they're not to safety yet. Who knows where they actually are? He hesitates until she tries to jump out of the moving vehicle, and he pulls over and they fight. He points out that he killed the guardians that got him into trouble to protect her and her husband, and she accuses him, as we discussed, of giving up those women to save himself. But once again, he didn't think he was giving up those women. He made that clear repeatedly. And it's her that he had to keep safe to get out of New Bethlehem. So he was also trying to protect her and the immediate danger. But June doesn't care about Nick the way he cares about her. So she accuses him of being just like them. He's still hanging on to the fact that she loves him, but not enough to care about him right now. She leaves and he's left yelling June after her, which reminded me when she was at rock bottom because she got someone killed while trying to protect herself. He was there for her and he did every possible thing he could to try to bring her out of her depression. He took the Jezebel's letters away for safekeeping when she was trying to burn them. He yelled desperately in the street after her like an idiot. And then he asked Serena to find her a mental health doctor. I mean, that's kind of stuff that made us fall in love with this couple and Nick. And it used to not be so one-sided. She used to ask, what about you? But she's a different character now as it pertains to him. She doesn't care about his safety anymore and preferred he let himself get put on the wall while she slept soundly at Serena's. And he'd shown her how broken he was last night when he asked her to spend the night and when he pulled her into that embrace. But she's really just like not even a decent friend to him at this point. It's so crazy to me how far she has fallen to not caring.
Yeah, I mean, she went from like 0 to 100, putting her whole emotional weight behind this Jezebel's thing. And I think she's just really not thinking clearly. But there's that seed of like what we've said at the beginning, that you can just tell that we're supposed to think this is so much worse than it is.
Yeah. I mean, it's literally just her reaction that is, people found out about this betrayal because this press notes on Hulu got out. So any hardcore fans already knew that there was a big betrayal coming later in the season, right?
Yeah.
But they probably thought it was like a real betrayal.
Right.
This is not a real betrayal where he's actually betrayed her.
Not at all.
He got cornered and had to tell him something, so he told him a plan that was a week away. So even the way that like people have been fearing should be fine. The problem is her reaction. And yeah, if it's just a normal June like blow up and she turns around and is fine, then okay, fine. But I don't know. I don't think they would have devoted a whole episode to it if it was going to go that way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm still just like hoping for that at this point,
for sure. Yeah, I'm just feeling very pessimistic at the moment.
No, I mean, there's reason for us to feel that way for sure.
Yeah. But it's also really hard to watch the scene where she walks away from him because like, that they're both technically in a lot of danger almost all the time now, again. And anytime they see each other could be the last one.
Yeah.
Right. And usually they remember that and they say goodbye appropriately. Right.
Yeah. But like, if I imagine this being their ending, like, I would feel absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
That would be a horrible, horrible ending for them after everything he's done for her, after everything they've gone through together.
Yeah. I can't believe she'd walk away like that either.
That's a really good point. She doesn't know what's going to happen to her. She doesn't know what's going to happen to him. So like, yeah, you're right. They never usually say goodbye on such bad terms.
Have they ever said goodbye in such bad terms? Not since she escaped Canada. They're careful about their goodbyes.
Yeah, for sure. I was also just thinking about some other things with the Jezebels. Like, I feel like the plan would have failed anyway. Are they going to get bombs into Jezebels after there was a lockdown? That seems unrealistic. Like, I think it was already falling apart before Nick said anything.
Yeah, great point. Of course they're not going to be able to get the bombs in after that. It's so crazy, though. Like, she called him to go into Jezebel's.
Right.
On top of having him murder these guardians because of her and Luke, she told him that those letters were worth him going into Jezebel's, which is what put him in this position. Because he jumps too when she calls, and he goes to get these letters for her, even though they're probably not worth risking his life. He cleans up the tooth she's left on the floor. He's done everything for her, and she just treats him like shit. I cannot believe it.
Yeah, if he hadn't gone there, none of this would have ever happened.
No, and it was unnecessary. I'm sorry, but those letters, I agree, I want them to get out, but the fact that she doesn't give like one iota of concern for his life in regards to all this, it's just so bad. Out of character. I'd like to believe it's out of character.
Yeah, I'm glad that in episode 3 he was like, "Hey, I'm risking my life to be here."
Mm-hmm.
Me too. Yeah.
I'm glad that he finally stood up for himself because, like, it's just sad that he thinks that his worth is tied to June when it so isn't. Like,
right. No, he deserves so much better at this point that
yeah.
I'm disappointed. But again, they just chose to write it that way, you know?
Yeah.
Up through season 4, they were a fantastic couple and it was much more balanced. And then she stays with Luke and we watched that for seasons only to watch her then trash Nick. I wouldn't have stuck with it had I known.
Yeah, me neither.
They also, I was just thinking back on other things that we were thinking of about this scene, or about the first two scenes here. Mayday was previously okay with the Jezebels being collateral damage.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
There's that too. Yeah. Before June said anything, even when she said something, they were like, well, it's war. That's what happens. Right?
Right.
So Mayday's fine with the women being killed. And now Mayday's disappointed that they couldn't have their plan, I guess. And June's furious.
Yeah. That same scene in episode 4 of season 6 where they're talking about, where June is upset that they're not worried about the women. Ellen, the Mayday leader, also says that they use taste testers now as a result of June's actions. So another thing that's getting potentially innocent people killed, I just thought of that, like, because if they're using random people to taste test poisoned things, do you know what I'm saying? Then they might die from poison.
Yeah.
Because now they're taste testing because June did a reckless plan in episode 2 of season 4. Like, there's just always so much fallout from things that she does that she doesn't think about. Or
And I really don't understand. I mean, going back to the Jezebel's poisoning, I just don't understand what was the purpose. Like, I know she wanted to kill commanders, but like there wasn't like a greater purpose or like attack plan.
Right. You need to do it strategically so that it makes sense, so that it's going to lead to something else. Like
Yeah.
killing some commanders just get filled back in.
And like even then, like her poisoning the commanders, you know, Gilead's already tipped off that they might be at the farm. So like let's poison commanders and tip them off even further. Like I don't get that. I understand June is emotional and wants to, you know, seek revenge on Gilead, but I just feel like it's very selfish.
it is.
She only cares about what she wants, and it doesn't matter who gets hurt in the process.
Yeah. Oh, also, Claudia mentioned this about Jezebel's when June was trying to get Janine to just go with them right then. So June was already screwing the Mayday plan for her own selfish reasons.
Oh, right. Yeah. That is another thing. And Moira was the only reason, well, Janine refused to go, which was cool of Janine. But yeah, she was perfectly willing to completely screw the Mayday plan.
Yeah.
And taking Janine out of there would have had the same effect, you know? Like, people would get in trouble because how did Janine get out? So maybe they'd kill all the women for that.
Yeah.
It just doesn't.
And it's exactly what Nick says to her in the scene, that people do try to save themselves. I mean, I think that he was shitting on himself because he was feeling bad about what happened and he was pretty broken by it.
Yeah.
But his point still stands that like everybody, if you have emotional attachments to someone or you have something personal, like June, even with the handmaids, giving the handmaids up because Hannah's in the box. Like, I know that's an extreme situation in season 4, but
right. But you protect your people.
Yeah.
You absolutely protect your people. That's human.
The point at which she was like, fine, I'll tell you whatever you want to know, is because her daughter was in danger. So Nick's telling Wharton whatever he wants to know because himself and June are in danger.
Yeah.
Same thing.
It's a human nature, like he said. Like, everything he said checks out. So I'm surprised with judging from the rest of the episode that they expect us to be. I think they expect us to be on June's side here. And I'm like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
What with the history of the show.
Yeah. She's not the one who comes off as really sympathetic here. And when she tells him that he's just like all the others, it's just like
awful.
It's awful and doesn't even make sense. Like, how is he exactly like the other commanders?
Yeah, not at all. Literally, the other commanders make fun of him for being a Boy Scout.
Exactly.
And you've seen him and watched his actions for years now, so many years, and you've watched him be the opposite of all the other commanders. You know, it's like shocking that he's at Jezebel's to get your fucking letters because he's a good guy and he doesn't go to Jezebel's, you know?
Well, and if you track back, like almost every single thing that he had to do that was
actually bad
in any way, like questionable or bad, it kind of is as a result of June. Like, if you track back through all of it.
I don't doubt that at all. Yeah.
I have a whole thing written down, but maybe it's way too long.
Don't do it.
Okay. So I was thinking the other day about how much more fucked up by Gilead Nick has become because of June. Not that this particular thing is her fault all the time, but she is now the number one weapon anyone can use against him, including June herself. Before June, Nick was already using the system to quietly and legally make things better, which was a smart and safe option for him. As Kate pointed out in our intro today, Nick joined the Eyes after the first Offred killed herself, which we see in Nick's flashbacks in season 1, episode 8. So Nick reported Commander Guthrie, the man who came up with the plan to round up and enslave women to be used as handmaids. Nick used evidence of crimes that were actually seen as illegal within Gilead to do this. He told Price that Guthrie was sleeping with his handmaids outside the ceremony and skimming from the transportation budget. So this was a very clear way to take down a person who had actually done morally horrible things that Gilead wouldn't see as illegal, like creating the Handmaid system. In season 2, Nick reported Commander Cushing in a similar way, which took Cushing out of power and also saved June and their household from interrogation and most likely the wall. This happened after Cushing was trying to find out who had helped June escape earlier in the season, which of course was Nick himself. Cushing had also increased security in Boston, which got an innocent Martha shot in the street, something June witnessed from the Waterford house. A lot of other households were being executed at that time due to Cushing, so Nick stopped that from continuing by using the laws of Gilead to remove another corrupt man from power. At the beginning of season 4, Nick saves Lawrence's life and gets him out of prison, which seems motivated by the fact that Lawrence is trying to make Gilead less violent through manipulating them into agreements with Canada to keep the Angel's Flight children there, rather than deporting them back to Gilead. At the end of season 4, after it was clear that Fred Waterford was not going to be receiving justice for the evil things he had done to countless women in Gilead, Nick used his status with the Eyes to take control of Fred in No Man's Land so that June and the other former handmaids could kill him in the woods. In season 5, Nick shot Commander Putnam after he'd raped Esther, which also solved Lawrence's problem of a corrupt commander in the way of his plans to make Gilead safer through New Bethlehem. In season 6, Nick used the laws of New Bethlehem and communication with Canada about their refugees to reunite families, which has the effect of removing people from Gilead and rehoming them in a safer environment with their loved ones in New Bethlehem. So then we go back to when June entered the picture in season 1, and here are the things that have happened to Nick or things he's had to do as a result of going against his own line that it's better not to form attachments and falling in love with June. In season 2, as Kate said, Nick is so worried about June that he corners Serena in the kitchen to ask for a mental health doctor. When Serena realizes how much Nick cares about June, she becomes jealous or maybe just wants to be cruel to June, or both, and she proceeds to manipulate Fred into doing something about it. Fred first tries to have Nick transferred to DC, then ends up getting Nick on the list of guardians to be married off to teenagers in a surprise ceremony, where Nick doesn't even know what's happening until he's on the stage and Eden is standing in front of him. So by caring about June, Nick receives what Gilead considers to be a promotion, and he is forced to marry. A few episodes later in season 2, June pushes Nick to have sex with Eden. She doesn't want to lose Nick, so he compromises his morals by doing something he would have clearly rather die than do if he was on his own to decide. You see him push back in the scene, saying that he can't do it, up until the point that June desperately tells him she needs him. In season 3, Nick is promoted to commander because, at the end of season 2, he held Fred at gunpoint to allow June and Holly time to escape. Another promotion due to his loyalty to June. This promotion is what sends him to fight in Chicago, which we can assume is another thing he really doesn't want to do. He seems crushed by this when he tells June he's being sent to the front. Fred was hoping Nick would die in Chicago, once again trying to get rid of the person who loves June and his daughter enough to die for them. So you could say that everything Nick has been pressured to do as a commander is as a result of his bold action with Fred at the end of season 2. If he refused to do any of the things he's being told to do by his superiors, they would just kill him and replace him with someone else who would do the job for them. So he can refuse and be killed, or he can do the things that he finds morally reprehensible but stay alive to help June in the future. This is something that June herself taught him to do. The biggest evidence of this being when she begged him to sleep with Eden to keep Nick off the wall. In season 4, at some point that we don't see, Nick marries again, which we can assume was at least partially arranged and not what he would have preferred to do. And this likely has similar motivations to previous things he's done. He needed to safely stay in Gilead to continue helping June, which he proves in season 4, episode 9 by giving June the unprompted file he's put together on Hannah. And now in season 6, Nick has had to kill 2 random guardians to save Luke and Moira for June, because she tells him she can't live without them. This significantly compromised his safety and was also morally upsetting to Nick, which we clearly see is because he doesn't want to kill anyone this way. Then Mayday swipes in again with some half-assed bombing plans at Jezebel's, and Nick's only choice to save his life and ensure that he can protect June and the people she loves is to give up the plans. This is another thing that you can see he didn't want to do, and which resulted in a lot of deaths he didn't expect, and he obviously feels a tremendous amount of guilt for that now. And June used to want Nick to stay alive at all costs, but now she apparently wishes he had died rather than give up the Mayday plans. All of this happened because June sent him to Jezebel's to get the letters from the safe for her. So June endangered Nick yet again due to something she recklessly asked him to do without thinking about any of the consequences for him. She literally asks him how he's coping with playing both sides in episode 3, so she knows about the complicated and constantly dangerous position he's in, but she still apparently tells him about the Mayday plan in episode 6. It comes across as arrogant and self-focused to me. She could have thought about him for a moment in episode 6 and said, hey, I can't tell you what I'm doing here because I know you're in a tricky spot and I don't want anyone to be able to use this against you. It's really not that hard for her to just have empathized with that. Anyway, I think all of this shows that Nick has been corrupted as much, or possibly more, by his love for June as by being physically present in Gilead, and it's kind of destroying him. The harm we've seen Nick have to inflict on innocent people has been fallout as a result of June or his love for her, even when it wasn't her fault. And what's so frustrating about this now is that if June could just understand this the way it seemed like she used to and communicate with Nick, they could actually work together and be smart about his position without him having to compromise himself over and over again for her.
Yeah, no, I agree. She is the worst influence on him. And she's, he stayed there initially too to get her information on Hannah. He gives her that folder on Hannah that he got after she left. He's just constantly doing everything for her. And, even I didn't see this, but you guys, somebody in the group saw an interview or something where Elizabeth Moss forgot that Eden had threatened to turn him in for gender betrayal, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's why, like, she was going to turn him in, and that's why June tells him he has to have sex with Eden, right?
Yeah.
Because he's just like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Right.
But she tells him he has to because she can't lose him. And so he does it. But how do people forget detail? I understand how Elizabeth Moss could forget. Like, she's got a lot going on. Totally. But how can the writers forget these details behind the whys of all the things that he's done and then just reduce it to he's as bad as everyone else when he's never, ever been remotely as bad as everyone else? But not even to the Lawrence degree. You know how like Janine tells him, you're not good, but you're compared to them, you are.
Yeah.
But Nick's like a whole different level of way better than Lawrence. Lawrence created the colonies. We're giving, and we love Lawrence. He's a funny character, but he is a much worse person than Nick is. And yet we allow him to come in during this episode and say that Nick's never been trustworthy. And it's so offensive.
It's so manipulative because it's like, I mean, I know Lawrence is just saying whatever because he's just grabbing whatever to get June on his side. But it's like, no, Nick has been his closest ally, and I get that you can't fully trust people in Gilead, but like to say that like
all along I've not. Okay, we'll get there.
When she's like about to jump out of the moving car.
Yeah.
I was wondering actually if part of the reason for that was because she doesn't want people to see Nick at the Mayday camp because she is feeling now embarrassed about what just happened.
I think she's just being crazy.
Probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe.
I also know that we all kind of wish that Nick had like defended himself or said more on the road about his real reasons, but that's something that you can really understand because that's in character for him, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like it would have been great if he had done that, but I think he tends to
self-loathe, and if she's gonna hate him,
he puts the shame and the stuff on himself and
rather than her.
Yeah. And he also feels terrible about it. I mean, you can see it, obviously.
That's the thing. He was almost like dead, like a shell of himself after killing Toby and the other Guardian, right? That's when he said, I need to see you. That's when he was visibly broken, and she finally sort of registers it, but not enough for it to stick with her. And then he had to watch. I don't know. I can't tell if he did watch or if he just...
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
All right, good. I'm glad he didn't watch, but he has to live now.
I think just knowing about it is now he's feeling that on his conscience heavy.
On his conscience with these women dying. So he feels like absolute shit. And this is when he could use somebody saying, hey, I love you. I know that you didn't do this on purpose,
Yeah.
This is Gilead. This happens. I'm sorry. But she does the opposite. Because she's so selfish. Oh, I hate what they've done to their story. I really hate it.
And I think based on the next scene where, well, I guess there's some stuff in between, but where she goes into the Mayday camp, I think that she knows that they're going to hate her. And that's another selfish thing.
Yeah.
Because she told Nick about it. So it's like, rather than defend him or explain how Gilead works to people, she is...
Blame it on Nick.
Yeah.
Yeah. She didn't tell them that she sent him back in there to get the letters.
No.
Right.
Didn't give them any of the full picture of the story at all.
Yeah.
Right. There's so many extenuating circumstances that nobody has discussed. Nick didn't defend it, like you said, but June knows enough that she can explain it to them, and she doesn't.
Yeah. I think this is another thing that I hadn't really considered, but yeah, she's being selfish in that way too, because she doesn't want people to hate her.
Right.
But I guess they're going to anyway because she told him, but
Right. But even leaving out that she's the one that asked Nick to go back in there for the letters, which he gladly did, and she should not leave that out, obviously. It's crazy that at a bare minimum, she still didn't offer them the most basic information about how it went down. that Nick was cornered by his father-in-law. She saw that much, and from what she said to him, you saved yourself. It is clear that she understood that he was cornered by threat of death into giving Wharton some intel that was true and made sense, or else he'd just end up on the wall. He had to explain 2 Guardians' deaths, and now a 3rd one that June had just killed at Jezebel's. Instead, by offering nothing at all, except that it was Nick that sold them out, she makes it sound like he tricked it out of her and gleefully ran to Daddy Wharton, bragging that he'd fooled her into giving up Mayday. Mwahaha. Like, imagine letting people think that of somebody that you cared about who had done so much for you. Anyway, next we see Lydia surveying the damage, and she's absolutely horrified, as anyone would be. It seems clear she thinks Janine was there when she picks up the Charlotte drawing, and this is the worst thing that could have happened to her favorite girl. Anne Dowd is amazing as always as she clutches the drawing to her chest and cries. By the way, we have an Anne Dowd interview coming out after episode 8. Looking forward to publishing that. She was delightful.
Yeah, she was lovely. I'm excited about that one.
I know. Then June's walking back into the Mayday camp. Luke's relieved to see she's okay, and June tells him it was Nick. Luke makes it clear he can't believe she trusted Nick. He's a commander in Gilead. But here's my question, Luke. You sent June and the baby in your care into his arms last season, so now we're pretending that you never trusted Nick?
Right. Luke is so condescending in this scene to June. But also, yeah, you're exactly right. Like, Luke has used Nick too.
Yeah.
The only time that he even had a conversation with June about Nick was to use him to get info on Hannah.
Right. Yeah. Why would he send a baby that he cared about into no man's land with only your trust of this man to guarantee their safety, right? So you certainly trusted him. And in fact, the very first time Luke ever met him, he was smuggling Mayday letters out of Gilead at great personal risk and taking Luke's words of love to his girlfriend at great personal pain.
Yep.
So I don't actually think he has a single reason to believe that he's a villain that wants Gilead to win. Every piece of information Luke has proves the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
The only rewarding part of this whole episode is Luke acknowledging that she's in love with Nick, but it doesn't feel that rewarding because she has no loyalty to Nick whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, Luke's only 3 encounters with Nick have been in positive ways.
Right.
Nick did something for him all 3 times. He gave him the letters, then he gave him the folder on Hannah when Luke made June and Holly go.
Yeah.
And then he saved his life.
He saved his life a couple days ago.
Like, those are the 3 things he knows about Nick. That's it.
But how could she trust him?
And that June, who Luke loves, somebody that she knows and loves and trusts, that he's like, you know what I'm saying? Like he's not only trusting like the things he personally knows about Nick, but he's not trusting like a fully grown adult to have formed her own thoughts about a relationship that she had. And he's not even asking her about it. He doesn't, they're not having any kind of like adult conversation about like, what really was this? What, you know, explain to me who this person is. Cause for right now, he doesn't know anything.
Right.
Yeah. She's down and he just kicks her further.
Yeah.
Right. This is where I can't help but get into one of the biggest reasons that I think fans are drawn to Nick and not Luke. I think that 2 of the most important character traits to me in real life and fiction are loyalty and kindness. And they're both definitely loyal to June without question. But early on when we met Luke, like our first knowledge of Luke was him being disloyal to his wife, Annie, his previous wife, Annie, and having an ongoing affair with June that lasted months at a minimum. Obviously, people make mistakes, so that's fine. Okay. The real problem for me, though, is how he treated her and many other women, people really, on the show. Nick treats everybody he encounters with kindness, something that I'll admit bothers me when it comes to Serena, but I appreciate the consistency in his character nonetheless. Luke, on the other hand, has treated so many people in the show with straight up rudeness and condescension, you know? Or like he left Annie, that same ex-wife that he betrayed, the most hateful message on the planet, screaming at her on her voicemail in a flashback from pre-Gilead.
Yeah, that was awful. And you could even see June was uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
It was upsetting to June.
Right. And the things that he was saying, I don't remember them at the time. Like, I don't remember them now, but it was basically felt like he was blaming everything on Annie when June at least realized the guilt that they had in the scenario. And Luke has, you know, it's not June's fault. Luke owed the loyalty to the wife. I'm not calling her a homewrecker or whatever. I'm not. But yeah, the anger with which he dealt with Annie, even knowing he had cheated on her for so long, is just awful. And even in Nick's worst moments with Rose at the jail, he's just broken. He's sadly telling her that he tried, but he just can't let June go. And he's not mean to her. And it's clear he's feeling extreme guilt, you know?
For sure.
Still shitty that it, you know, they're having these affairs, but the way that they take on the guilt of it and speak to these other women is just so different. But it's not just Annie either. It's everyone. He makes, you know, in the beginning, he makes the juvenile and frankly, very rude assumption about June and her best friend Moira hooking up pre-Gilead simply because Moira's gay.
Yeah.
And then he's condescending to June when Gilead starts happening. He'll take care of her because she's my wife. Something even Moira calls out as condescending.
Yeah, I think she calls him patronizing.
Yeah, and it's the way they've written him. It's not even OT's fault. It's just the way that they've written him. Last season, he's like, sorry, I'm being such a man about it. And these lines are just.
Well, and it's stuff that's actually good to build his character, you know? Not liking those things about him to me is part of the character. It's not like.
I used to think that, but I feel like the writers really actually want you to like Luke now, which is why they keep reinventing him, you know? And I don't understand the inconsistency because they're the ones that wrote him this way. And like, do you remember that Emily scene in season 4?
Yeah.
She's like fresh from her escape from Gilead, and he's so mean to her at dinner when she's saying she just needs some time before she calls her wife.
Right.
And yeah, I get the similarities, but you cannot talk to women like that. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm just thinking like, because we've had so many seasons of finding these, what I would consider consistencies in his character, the way he acts.
Yeah.
It did seem like they were trying to build that to show that that's how he was and that it was kind of subtle.
But do you not get the impression that they like want to change that now, like late in the game?
No, I do. But it's strange. It feels strange because of all the building they've done on his character in the past, you know? It feels like it doesn't make any sense to change that now.
Right.
Or to try and convince us of something that is not what we've seen for all these years in his character.
Right. Random things are popping in my head. The guy that drove them out of Boston, do you remember how rude he was to him? And when the guy was saying, like, you just can't take baggage, we just have to take guys. And he was rude to him about not being able to take stuff with them.
He insisted on the photo album.
Yeah, but it was the attitude that set me off. Like, this man is risking his life.
Yeah.
And he died. Right? Didn't he die like hours later, we're told?
Yeah, he was caught somewhere, I think.
Right.
After he got June, Luke, and Hannah to the cabin. Yeah.
I would just be talking to this man like the nicest fucking human being on the planet because he's literally saving you, hopefully. I don't know. It's just, I really care about kindness in people. And I think that's probably all these incidents of him being rude or condescending to people. And I'm sure there's a lot more because I'm just thinking off the cuff here. And I don't know if this falls under kindness. It certainly does to some degree, but also when June asks him not to go to the testimony and he
I was just thinking that.
like, I know better than you. I'm going to go. I mean, this woman's been raped hundreds of times and God knows what else. And she's asked you to let her tell you in time, you know? She needs this moment. It's hard. It's hard to go back over that in front of people. Can you please just not come?
Yeah.
And he fucking shows up. I don't know. I feel like the show doesn't understand why people don't really like Luke. And these are all the reasons and they were written for him, you know?
Yeah, it's okay not to like him. That's the thing. It's like they've decided that it's not okay for us to not like him. And it's like, I thought that was the whole point.
That's just not it. Yeah, and he's a character in a show. So it is okay not to like any character.
Right. It has nothing to do with the actual actors playing the characters. It's the characters themselves.
Right. And there's so many reasons. So, okay, I'm sorry for that tangent. Back to the scene. My only other note that I wrote down is kind of what I was saying before. I probably will say again, I think it's crazy she didn't tell him any extenuating circumstances about why Nick told Wharton about their plan.
Yep.
Not that he was cornered by his father-in-law, nothing. How could you not say that in defense of like what's happened? I don't understand.
And maybe not in this exact scene. Like I could understand she's so like she can barely even talk because she's crying. Like I could understand that. But like in the next scene when she's with Luke again and more level-headed, she should have explained way more about what actually happened and defended Nick.
Yeah. Anyway, she cries and says she doesn't know what to do, while Luke gleefully adds another tally to the Nick is a Nazi this season count. Then Rita visits Nick and she's trying to be kind to him and tell him what we all know, that he's a good person, but he's fully given up on himself now that June has confirmed his worst fears that he's nothing and he's not worth anyone's love or concern, so he treats Rita coldly and she leaves in tears. I don't think this is very in character for Nick, even when he's hating on himself, because he's always treated every woman with the utmost care and respect. And Rita is one of the closest things he has to family. But what with what the show's obviously trying to do to his character, why not?
Yeah, I feel like in this moment too, there's something going on where he's feeling like he can't trust anyone telling him he's a good person for his own, I'm nothing kind of reasoning, but also because it does kind of seem like everybody wants something from him. Like, I know that's not Rita's intention at all, and they are friends, and he's helping her, but she's telling him that, and he knows that she needs something from him. So he can't really believe people that are saying that to him because they also want something.
Right, and June has just proven, without a shadow of a doubt that she's just been using him for things that she wants,
Yeah, he feels used by everyone.
So I get that. Ugh.
Yeah, and I get that because, like he said in the previous episode, that June sometimes he thinks June's the only good thing in his life,
Yeah.
and when the only good thing in your life tells you that you're just like the other commanders,
Yeah.
and essentially tells you that you're a bad person,
Yeah, it's horrible.
then hearing from somebody else that no, you're actually a good person. Yeah, I get that he may not be able to hear that at this point.
Absorb that.
Mhm.
Right.
And I think, like, as far as people needing his help and maybe using his position, because unfortunately he is a commander and probably does have some power and ability to do something, like, he's not blaming them for that. I think it's just a fact, and people are going to see him that way. So, and I don't think he's saying that he won't help Rita either. I think he's letting it sit that way, which is shitty, but he's just too broken to really defend himself. And he's kind of right that she shouldn't rely on anybody because everybody can be compromised within Gilead.
Yeah.
So there's some truth to it. It was harsh the way he said it, and it was hurtful, but he's not wrong in that sense, I don't think.
Yeah. And I think, like, how Gilead operates, I think it's true that you can be friends with somebody and still be afraid of them, because I think that's just, like, inherent. Gilead wants people to,
Distrust.
not trust each other.
Yeah.
The distrust, so that they don't form these bonds and then, try to rebel against Gilead. So
Exactly, yeah.
I think both things can be true. I mean, it sucks to say, we were friends, but we were also scared of each other. But he was right, I think. So
I don't think he would have ever turned on her, though, once they were friends,
No.
Or even possibly before. They had that bonding moment early on when they found the first handmaid hanging from the ceiling, too, and they were both horrified. And
Yeah.
I think that probably was the beginning of more of a relationship between them. And then she saw, scenes like him and June and Holly in their the only time he's ever held the baby so far, his daughter. I do think that they have a close bond, like Rita seems to think, but like you said, he's just too broken right now to acknowledge it.
Yeah. I think he just feels very, very alone, too.
For sure. How could he not?
Yeah.
He is very alone. Literally nobody cares about him. Although Rita seems to, and hopefully she still does.
I think it's hard to accept that when you feel like unlovable, or, it's hard to accept someone telling you good things.
Right, for sure. Serena's found herself in another shower, a bridal shower this time, with the catty group from Boston. It's fun to see some familiar faces from the past. They're all dissing New Bethlehem, and then they move on to the Handmaids. Serena has taken up the Handmaid retirement package as her new cause, but all she finds in all the other women is her previous attitude towards handmaids. Who cares what happens to them after they give us their babies? Let the commanders work that out.
I did like Naomi's line where she said, though I must say it is refreshing hearing you give the matter so much consideration.
Yeah. That is really funny.
I do love Ever this season.
I know. I love her too. She's so good this season. She's funny. And that's also a very valid point. We're all going to pretend that Serena's suddenly a totally different person.
Yep.
Yeah.
Serena's still upset later when Wharton comes to chat with her about their new home. They decide together that a huge wedding in Boston will reestablish their superiority. Think Fred's funeral, but a wedding. I'm sure it will be a television hit, the likes of Prince William and Catherine's wedding.
The best line from that scene to me was Wharton saying, hard to find something tasteful that will be big enough. Talking about like trying to find a Boston house.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Oh,
Okay.
God.
Josh Charles is really good as Wharton.
He is really good.
I enjoy that.
Yeah, he's been so good.
I did have a side note, like, just throughout this whole episode, the whole season, Serena's outfits are so, like, over the top. It's just, like, ridiculous. I don't know if it's just, like, there's better fashion options in New Bethlehem, but
I think she's just really embracing the ability to wear something that's not the same teal dress.
yeah.
I actually do like seeing her in different colors, though.
Yeah.
I like the color scheme this season being a bit different. And now it's back to taking turns talking shit about Nick with every character. This time it's Moira's turn. She seems nice at first. He never gave you any reason not to trust him. True. Still true. But then the conversation takes a pretty offensive turn. They start talking about how hot Nick is, comparing him to female superstars for some reason. This just feels like all the people on the internet saying how everyone only likes Nick because he's hot. It's reductive and offensive to Nick, June, Max, and the fans of Nick and June. And I misses the whole actual point of what draws people to his character. Reasons like him giving June exact words of love from her husband when it breaks his heart to do so, or helping her escape not once but twice, holding Fred at gunpoint all night so she can get away, knowing it will result in him being put on the wall. But actually, it resulted in him being promoted to commander because Fred knew he would hate that. And that is why he's a commander and not a driver anymore. So when they talk about, him as this generic commander in Gilead, it drives me crazy.
Yep, definitely. The whole conversation that they have about the hotness measuring.
Ugh, gross.
It also kind of annoyed me because, in the flashback in episode 6, the previous episode, where it's just like very sweet and she's like trying to compliment him and stuff and does the good, kind, brave thing and then tells him that he's really handsome. But it's like she's just giving him this like cute little compliment because he can't take the previous compliment. It's like a nice little bantery kind of moment. I love that. But now in the Moira scene, they're just acting like women are too stupid to have common sense around an attractive man.
Yeah.
And it feels like
so gross.
That just feels directly offensive because it's like it makes that other comment less cute now to me.
Yeah. Takes that away. Right.
And are the writers of this episode actually trying to say that women, like female fans, are too stupid to figure out like a male character for anything other than his looks?
Yeah.
Are they really saying that? Because if they are, that is extremely offensive.
Also, what are we saying about OT here? Like, OT is very attractive. Why are we reducing, we only like Nick because he's attractive? I just think it's offensive to everyone, and it makes no sense whatsoever.
For sure.
I mean, I think all the fans would be grossed out if it was two men comparing June's looks.
Absolutely.
So I don't get how it's okay for like Moira to just compare. And I get that maybe the writers wanted to put in like a moment of levity between the two of them, but like
for sure
they could have done something else.
It was the wrong tone.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that it's very normal for writing staff to change in shows that go on for as long as The Handmaid still has.
Right.
But the new writers they brought in season 5, especially when it comes to Nick, they really seen him in a very different light compared to some of the old writers. And that makes the scripts very uneven when it comes to his scenes.
Yeah.
And now, especially this season, they brought in these little phrases, these little digs that seem to be directed at fans, not just at characters.
Right.
Which is, of course, it's fair game. But when you're directing these words at fans, we're really stepping into dangerous territory here.
No, I agree. That's why, like, this whole episode I said feels like it's addressing fans, and I think that's what I found so infuriating about it.
We also got a scene where Moira and June are actually talking about Nick, which it's not like we want them to just sit around talking about him all the time, but we wanted them to have a conversation about it because it is a big part of June's life that Moira doesn't understand.
Yeah, this elephant in the room. Yeah.
They're finally talking about it, and this is the way they talk about it.
This is it, right.
It's the most shallow thing ever.
They're taking things that we hoped for and turning it and trying to, like, hurt you with it, you know?
Yeah.
And, like, didn't Moira say, like, he saved our lives? Like, something to that. But then June was like, it doesn't matter, like...
Okay, yeah. Moira said, he never gave you any reason not to trust him. I mean, you were stuck in Gilead, and then he was kind to you. He helped you survive. I mean, you'd be dead if it weren't for him. June, we might all be.
Yeah.
And then June says, well, it doesn't justify anything. And then Moira says, no, but it makes it, I don't know, understandable. And then it degrades from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, she acknowledges what he's done. I mean, the sacrifices he's made for her, for Moira.
Yep.
In the next scene, June basically asks Luke if she can keep him as a consolation prize now that she can't have the man she's in love with. Luke, you deserve better, man. I wish he understood that. But at this point, as far as June is concerned, if she really is willing to drop Nick without even a single real conversation, she is not the kind of character that deserves that kind of love anyway. And it's ironic when she says, I don't want you to stay with me because you feel sorry for me. I don't want you to pity me, because that's exactly how it seemed for 3 seasons now as to why she's with Luke. Anyway, in summary, yet another near Luke and June breakup is narrowly averted and the uncomfortable marriage carries on.
Yeah, I can kind of see some of what she's saying as a deflection for literally the reason that you just said, that it's stuff that she feels, and now she's saying it as if it's stuff she's been doing. But she like just can't really face it, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know. this continual like guilt-laden marriage. I don't know what kind of lesson this is supposed to be teaching anyone.
Yeah. Maybe this will be the end of it. I feel like you can see that Luke needs to let her go in this scene though. Like you can kind of see that it's not just one-sided about them not being in love anymore romantically.
Yeah, I think he's done a good job this whole season of that. I think OT's kind of finally shown that in almost every scene together. Nobody will pull the trigger.
Right. But I think it's nice to show that because before it was like
He wanted her.
Luke was pretty much tied to her and now he's got his own story. And things are not the same for him either. He was holding on to something that doesn't exist anymore too.
Right.
So it's nice to see him like realizing that and moving towards.
But how many more of these scenes are we gonna have?
Yeah, but it feels like they're working towards something, I guess. But maybe not. And it's only been like a week since episode 3, by the way. I went back and I was like, oh, this has all happened in 1 week. That's pretty insane.
Yeah.
It's also really uncomfortable to me to see how small June gets in this episode and how she is around him that way, around Luke that way.
Right.
And she kind of does that with him a lot, though. She like placates and acts small.
Yes.
And then if she gets angry, that's really the only time she finally says how she really feels about anything with him, with Luke. And it's very uncomfortable to see her reverting back to that.
Yeah, but we've now been seeing it for like 2.5 seasons. She acts so small around him. That's a very good way to say it. And it's painful to watch them on screen. And I can't believe that it's been dragged out for 2.5 seasons.
Yeah.
Lydia delivers Janine's new costume personally, where Bella acts shady as fuck, and tells Lydia Janine won't be going to the wedding because she's not ready for public viewing at the moment. And we quickly see what that means as a severely beat up Janine is reaching her hand towards Lydia from the window above, as Belle's wife rips her away from the window. So if there was any question if Belle's wife was complicit or not, there's your answer.
I think Belle might be the worst human being in all of Gilead.
Yeah, he might be, which is really saying something. Good job.
Awful. So awful.
They did a really good casting choice, though, with him.
Yeah.
I like the actor they chose.
Same. Despite convincing Luke to continue their marriage, June is crying in a room by herself when she sees Lawrence pull up. He's angry and motivated and not in the mood to deal with the Mayday chick's attitude, so when he sees June through a window, he hurries inside to deposit his dagger into Nick's metaphorical back. He tells June that he always thought she was an idiot for trusting him and that Lawrence himself never really trusted Nick, and then he also reduces Nick to a smoldering gaze. If I were Max, I'd be so offended by this writing. This whole episode, I cannot tell you. So reductive of 6 seasons of his incredible performance. Also, Lawrence clearly trusted Nick until this season when the High Commander moved into his house and demanded he be his sidekick instead of Lawrence's, which made Lawrence sad. But it's not like Nick sought this big baddie out of the wild to befriend. He moved into his house right when Nick started trying to spy for the Americans, putting Nick in enormous daily danger. But we're going to ignore that, I guess, and not acknowledge there is a reason that Lawrence does need to be careful about what he says around him this season.
Raquel mentioned something that I like too, that Nick has literally saved the lives of the people trashing him in this episode.
Everyone.
Like of Luke and Lawrence. Both the people who are just trashing him, he saved their lives, literally.
And Moira.
And Moira, yeah, and Moira. Which I don't know. Moira didn't really trash him though, but yeah.
Yeah, she was better. And obviously June. So yeah, that's a very good point. He saved all of these people's lives.
Yep.
And this is how he is repaid. At personal risk to himself. Every time.
Yeah.
Moira and Luke don't really know Nick, but Lawrence does. He's seen his devotion towards June.
Right.
So why would he think that June shouldn't trust Nick?
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
Oh, you know what else I just thought of that pisses me off? The times that Lawrence has been untrustworthy. He was supposed to help with Angel's flight in season 3, but instead he totally bailed on June, wasn't even at the house, fled for the border with his wife, and he only came back and eventually helped because he failed to escape. His whole household and 70-odd children be damned if he had succeeded. And there was also the time when Lawrence made a deal behind Nick's back with the other commanders in season 4 to bomb Chicago, even though he knew June was there. He delighted in Nick being blindsided in the middle of that commanders council meeting, if I recall, when it was too late to do anything about it. So if our character witness is untrustworthy, then I'm certainly not going to take his gaslighting as truth.
No, and another thing that kind of pisses me off about Lawrence shitting on Nick in this episode, which I kind of get like a couple reasons why he's doing it because of all the manipulation that he wants to do of June here. But Nick is in charge of New Bethlehem security. And Lawrence doesn't go immediately to Nick to tell him what he overheard in Jezebel's in episode 5. That the commanders are planning to trap people there and close the borders. Like he heard them saying that and
Right.
Nick could do something about that. And instead, he just goes and tries to figure out a way to save his own life. That's what it feels like, at least at this point.
Yeah. for sure.
Like, I get that June ran into Lawrence as he was leaving Jezebel's in episode 5, and the plan became about killing the commanders. But I just feel like he should have called Nick right away anyway and told him to start getting people out of there and back to Canada.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Just if he really cared about New Bethlehem and the whole project, it just seems weird to me.
Yeah. Then Lawrence tries to use Serena to motivate June. She clawed her way back on top, and you're just going to scamper off to Alaska? That didn't work, so he tries to guilt her over the handmaids, so she's just going to leave them to be handmaids forever. That didn't work either, but when he tells her Janine is trapped in Belle's house as his handmaid, that gets her attention. And then June's back. The wedding is the perfect venue for their attack.
You know, about Lawrence manipulating June with Serena, he also manipulated Serena in like the same way in episode 2. You know,
Mhm.
like when he went to her at the Canaan farm or whatever, like he's just,
Yeah.
he's going around and figuring out ways to manipulate women for his own like purposes, kind of.
And successfully, also.
Yeah. But they both are, I don't know, it feels like they both have power trips that he can clock into.
Yes, that's very true. Lawrence adds that because of the Jezebel's attack, they just had a win, so they're going to be distracted. And June contributes that the handmaids had nothing to do with Jezebel, so they're the perfect group to use right now. So they're going to go back in, hidden as handmaids, and Moira is very on board. Turns out Rita is going to bake the cake after all, just with a little more poison than Serena was probably imagining. It's probably very hard to conceal the taste of poison in a cake, but I'm very excited Rita's joining in. Or I will be if this June aggressively turning on Nick distraction can stop being so distracting.
I love how Tuello somehow acquired a pelican case that like perfectly fits the vials of the like poison.
Yeah.
They just have really cool gear, and I don't know where they're getting it from.
Yeah.
How long do we think the planning of this May Day thing and the wedding all took place? Like, how long between planning it to the wedding? Like a couple of days?
I mean, she had to change the venue massively. I would think it would be like a week, no?
Yeah.
It just feels so quick, but
Yeah.
it's hard to know, I guess. Another thing, though, about this plan is that, once again, June is not thinking this through because these handmaids could potentially be collateral damage from this plan.
Right.
Oh, for sure.
Probably would be.
And they're not asking them if they want to do this or not.
Yeah.
If some of them don't want to, too bad. You're there. You're going to be part of it.
Right.
So they're giving them no choice and making them take the risk.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I did like the line when, at the very end of the montage, when Lawrence pulls up to the Red Center and the Guardian says, "Blessed evening, Commander," and he says, "No doubt."
Yeah, me too.
That was pretty good.
It's like old school Lawrence.
Yeah.
Gilead
Yeah.
response. I love that. I do love Bradley Whitford so much.
Mhm.
Anyway, Lawrence goes to talk to Lydia. He's arranged a meeting for her in DC. She worries briefly about missing the wedding, but the handmaids are more important, he insists, and it can't be postponed. Poor Lydia really wants to go to the wedding. It's like Janine with the Mexican ambassador dinner in season 1.
Oh. There's another scene where I can't really tell Lawrence's. It just seems like he's acting like he finally cares about the fertility center, but just when it suits his new plan. Like he wasn't really interested in hearing
Yeah.
about this before, but now he's
Yeah.
like, "I need you, so now I'm gonna act like I care."
Yeah, interesting, Lawrence this season. Oh, and during that montage, this is where they say they use everybody that has anything against Gilead, right?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously they don't use Nick, and that's also pisses me off because he would be happy to strike back against Gilead.
Yep.
But here we are.
I mean, I think he would be even more effective, like, to be in on the plan because,
Yeah.
like, logistically, it makes sense to clue him in.
Yes.
But
And I believe June wouldn't trust him at this
No.
moment because it's so fresh, but it's just annoying to watch something that we have wanted forever go down
Mm-hmm.
and specifically not use him and use everybody else, you know?
Yeah, and he was worried about Mayday's approach to this before.
Right.
He was worried people were going to get killed for nothing. But this is actually like fairly well organized now, and it seems like they're.
Yeah, he would love this.
Yeah, he
Right?
would be able to help them with this for sure.
So, with the entire plan not involving Nick at all, I think this is where they want to go with the entire storyline of June no longer needing Nick in the future. I don't know where that's going to lead Nick in the end, but
Yeah.
basically June is she's going to learn how to survive and how to get things done without asking Nick for help.
Yeah.
So does that mean that in the end he won't be a commander anymore? Or what does it mean?
Right. I hope to God he goes underground. If he doesn't, I will riot because that's insane. It's just illogical. But we'll find out.
Yeah, it's the way it's felt like this has got to be going this whole time.
Yeah. Well, and he also had their passports prepared to leave. Like,
Yeah. He was ready to get out.
he's ready to go. And then June stupidly told him to go to Jezebel's and blew that up. But he's ready to go. If he continues as a commander at the end of the show, I will not be okay with that.
That wouldn't make any sense.
While Lawrence is distracting Aunt Lydia, badass Aunt Phoebe is distracting the guards so she can get June and Moira out of the truck and smuggle them into the Red Center. When they get inside, Phoebe explains that Belle won't let Janine come to the wedding, so she hasn't been read in on the plan, and June happily promises to handle that situation. Then Phoebe is caught by Aunt Lydia sneaking around places where she shouldn't be, but Lydia ultimately lets her suspicious excuses fly and tells her she has to go to DC tonight, even though she doesn't want to leave her girls for the wedding.
Yeah, I love Darcy Carden in this. I think she's doing great.
She's so good.
This is such a good character too, and
Yeah.
I love that for her because she's a great actor.
I love Ann Dowd's, how her delivery, she was like, a mop? And then she said, I will hold you to it.
I know, the to it again.
Yes, I was going to say that too. That's so funny. I feel like she had to have been referencing that line, right?
Yeah.
The way she emphasized it.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
Oh my gosh. It was so good. I know it wasn't meant to be comedic, but it's just, I laughed during it. It was like, oh my God, her delivery.
Well, I think it is. Like,
Yeah.
we talked to her about it in our interview that comes out after episode 8, and she definitely sees the humor in Aunt Lydia and does it intentionally. It's so good.
Good.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
It works perfectly because it's not like she's telling jokes. It's just
Right.
her inflections and some of the line delivery. And
It's so unique, though. Her
Yeah,
delivery
yeah.
is amazing.
I know.
I love her.
I also just made a note that June and Moira are getting pretty used to being packed together in the trunk of Lawrence's car.
Yeah. It's their little spot.
They've got their like positions worked out, exactly where their arms are going to go.
Yeah.
And then Moira and June have a little moment wondering how on earth they've let themselves end up back in the Red Center. And Moira asks June to say something leaderly. I like that word. She says some biblical lines and ends it with a decidedly unbiblical, and please, dear God, give us the strength to murder those goddamn motherfuckers. To which Moira closes the episode with a fucking men.
As much as we're kind of like pretty annoyed with June at this stage,
Yeah.
I love that June and Moira are doing another mission together.
Yes, I do too.
Because that is a really great duo that we've been excited about. And
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Again, I'm just very distracted by this last minute devotion, the amount of minutes they're devoting on screen to trying to tell us that we should not trust Nick. I just, they're trying to manipulate us, it feels like, and it's very offensive to people that have paid attention the whole time. So it's distracting to me.
Yeah.
And it's harder for me to be excited about June and Moira.
Yeah.
Whereas normally I would be. Like, that's the kind of stuff I wanted this season,
Right.
Mhm.
But you're right, though. It feels so nonsensical that it feels intentionally manipulative.
Right.
And I think that's what's making it so distracting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I have to admit that because of what they did to Nick in this episode, to Nick and June's relationship,
Yeah.
I didn't even remember that there were these scenes between Moira and June.
Right. I know what you mean. Yeah. Yeah, those scenes disappeared a bit, and that's sad.
I know. It's such a shame. I love Samira. Like,
I know. Me too.
she's probably my favorite actress on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see that.
Yeah, she's incredible. And she's had such a strong season.
Yeah.
Great scenes for her. Great material.
Mhm.
I'm really glad they found some kind of way to use her, because in season 5 it didn't really feel like they knew how to use Moira and what her purpose was going to be.
Yeah.
But now I think they know where she's going and what she's going to be doing, and that's really great to see.
Yeah, and they actually were able to use the fact that they didn't know as a plot point in this season.
Yeah.
With her and June having that argument about how she's just been living June's life.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which was really good for them to address that. I felt like they did a nice job of tying that together and making it make sense why they had her. I mean, it's unfortunate because it would have been nice if they could have done it in like 1 or 2 episodes of season 5 and had her do more. But I like that they made it make sense for their relationship. And it was a good thing for them to have to deal with together about that dynamic.
Yeah.
I think like my final note about June in this whole episode is that she needs to make a spreadsheet. She needs to sort out her feelings in a logical, like, what has Nick done for you, honey? Let's list it.
Uh-huh.
Let's make a spreadsheet.
Yes. And what has he done maliciously?
Yep.
That should be a short column.
Yep.
All right, I guess that's a wrap on our discussion of season 6, episode 7. I'm glad it's over.
Good riddance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully it will redeem itself.
Yes.
Hopefully. If you made it this far, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.